What if your chest isn't just a rib cage, but, a high-pressure CPU cooling
I
system?
mean, it sounds like the premise of a hard sci-fi novel.
Right, exactly.
But if we actually map that idea onto how human beings process high-density information, it makes a profound kind of structural sense.
Yeah. Hold on to that image for a second, because if you're listening to this, you are intimately familiar with how your own hardware works.
Even if you don't really think about it in those exact terms.
Exactly. Imagine your physical body is the hardware, and your consciousness is the operating system.
Right.
And every single day, you are downloading gigabytes of data, opinions, facts, global tragedies, personal realizations.
And some of that data is incredibly light, easy to process.
Yeah, but occasionally you hit a piece of data that is fundamentally incompatible with your current operating system. Like a truth that is so heavy, it literally threatens to break your worldview.
And when that happens, your internal cooling system starts to fail
Yeah.
because the processor is redlining.
Yes. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing gets shallow. Your chest physically tightens up.
So what if there's a highly technical, almost architectural manual for how to prevent that specific system crash?
And what if that manual isn't from, like, a Silicon Valley tech giant, but is actually hidden within the linguistic structure of an ancient scripture?
Which is the radical pivot we are looking at today in this deep dive.
We are exploring a fascinating book called The Algebra of Revelation by J.R. Ahmed.
Right, and the mission here is to understand how the author strips away centuries of, well, mystical or purely theological interpretations.
Exactly.
And instead, he reads the Quran as a literal structural manual for human cognition.
It is a massive shift in perspective. Like, whether or not you subscribe to the theology, treating ancient scripture as a cognitive stress test is just a radically different way to view religion.
It really is. Ahmed argues that the text operates like an alphanumeric source code.
Yeah. And to understand it, we have to look at how he frames those cryptic opening letters of the 7th chapter.
All right, the letters are A-L-M-S, or Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad.
And historically, you'll see these letters treated as an unknowable mystery, right? Like a divine secret.
Yeah, but Ahmed counters that entirely. He frames this ALMS header not as a mystery, but as a technical metadata tag.
A metadata tag.
Literally, it's a protocol for structural integrity.
Like the code at the top of a web page that tells your browser how to render the site.
Exactly like that. So let's trace this data lifecycle, because Ahmed doesn't just list these letters. He argues they represent a chronological flow of information.
Okay, so how does he break that down?
Well, he deconstructs the ALMS header through the internal lexicon of the text itself. Imagine a single piece of data leaving a primary server.
Got it.
That origin point is the first letter, Alif. In Ahmed's framework, this is the primary source or the absolute systemic intent.
So it's the hardware of existence, the starting point of the logical chain.
Right. Alif is the mainframe. Then the data has to travel.
And that's the second letter, Lam.
Yes. Lam represents the data link. It is the unbroken channel of transmission between that primary source and the human domain.
Wait, so if the LAM is the data link, it's basically the Wi-Fi connection between absolute reality and human consciousness.
That's a great way to put it.
Which means the third letter, MIM, isn't just an abstract message. It's the actual download completing on our end.
Precisely. MIM is the manifestation. It's the point where the transmitted code renders clearly within the human intellect or the material world.
It becomes the software.
Exactly. So you have the source, the transmission, and the manifestation. Sender, signal, receiver.
Okay, so Aleph, Lam, Mim. Logically, you could stop there, right? The message has been sent and received.
You'd think so. But there is a fourth letter appended to this specific protocol, the letter SAD.
And this is where the CPU analogy really clicked into place for me.
SAD changes the entire function of the module. Linguistically, Ahmed points out that SAD is the root for two crucial concepts here,
Which are?
truth or veracity, and the sadder, which translates to the chest or the human frontal processing center.
Okay, so systemically, the SAD represents validation and resilience.
Right.
It's a cryptographic checksum.
Exact.
For you listening, if you've ever downloaded a massive operating system update for your computer, the system runs a checksum.
Right, a complex mathematical algorithm.
Yeah, to verify that the file didn't get corrupted during the download, it ensures the structural integrity of the new code before installing it.
That's the exact mechanism here.
But here's where I have to push back a little on the author's premise. I mean, I get hardware and I get software.
Sure.
But why does an objective truth need a stress test? Like, what exactly is at risk of breaking here?
Well, that is the essential question.
Yeah.
What is at risk of breaking is the processor itself, the human chest, the Satter.
Okay, so the SAT in the preamble is the essential checksum for the chest.
Exactly. Ahmed points to the very first verses immediately following these letters.
What do they say?
The text explicitly says, "A book revealed to you, so let there not be in your chest constriction from it."
Wow.
The manual immediately connects the metadata tag to the prevention of a condition called haraj.
And haraj means constriction, right? Or straightness.
Yes, so the equation is essentially this. The source transmits a manifestation that requires structural validation within the processor.
And if you apply that validation protocol correctly, the human chest actually expands. It becomes a capable reservoir for high-density data.
You got it. The core processor increases its capacity.
But if that structural integrity is missing, the checksum fails.
And if the checksum fails, the chest experiences that haraj. It becomes a point of extreme high friction.
Which fundamentally destroys the human node's ability to operate properly.
Exactly. If that SAD protocol fails, the human machine experiences catastrophic overheating.
So what does an actual system crash look like in the human body?
Ahmed calls this the physics of cognitive constriction.
Oh, that's an intense phrase.
It is. He draws on another part of the text to define what this constriction actually feels like. He describes a state where the chest is made so tight and constricted, it is as though the person were climbing up into the sky.
Like the atmosphere is thinning out and you literally cannot pull enough oxygen into your lungs.
Right, so haraj is not framed as an abstract moral failing or like a sin.
It's a physiological response.
Ahmed defines it as the mathematical equivalent of oxygen deprivation. It's a systemic failure caused by resisting the natural atmospheric pressure of the truth.
Let's translate this into an everyday feeling. Think about a time you encountered a reality so dense, so contrary to your biases, that it physically hurt to process.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe it was the sudden realization that a long-term relationship was built on a lie.
Or the collapse of a political ideology you built your entire identity around.
Yeah, exactly. When that data hits your system, your brain kicks into overdrive, your chest gets incredibly tight, and you feel this intense, suffocating friction.
That physical and cognitive dissonance is haraj.
That is a perfect real-world application. It's the physical manifestation of a cognitive crash.
And the ALMS protocol is a calibration manual designed entirely to prevent that psychological suffocation.
So it allows your chest to handle the atmospheric pressure of reality without compressing.
Exactly.
Okay, so if this is the calibration manual, the author must provide an example of what happens when a system operates without it, right?
He does. And to show us this system failure in action, Ahmed takes us all the way back to the very first test run of the human hardware.
Right, and this is where Ahmed presents a truly radical thesis. He reframes the entire origin story of Adam.
Yes. Within this alphanumeric framework, he argues that the narrative of Adam isn't a literal historical recount of the first biological human.
Right.
Nor is it a simple morality tale.
It's an instructional simulation.
Precisely. It's a simulation detailing the activation of a prototype node.
A prototype node. I love that phrasing.
The system is demonstrating what happens when a biological entity is suddenly granted a cognitive processor and a conceptual vocabulary.
And then it's subjected to opposing forces in a closed environment.
Exactly.
Right.
The opposing forces being the pure divine protocol on one side and systemic noise on the other.
And that systemic noise is personified in the text as the distorter or the whisperer.
Right.
But the mechanism of this noise is so incredibly specific, like it's a literal noise injection.
Yes. The text describes the distorter whispering into the breasts of mankind.
Into the processor.
Into the processor itself. The chest is the actual battlefield for this signal interference.
It's an injection of corrupt code meant to disrupt the ALMS signal.
Exactly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because this is a massive departure from how this story is usually told.
Right.
I mean, traditionally, whether you're looking at Sunday school lessons or classical theology, this story is about an apple, a tree, and a sudden, shameful embarrassment about being naked.
Right.
How on earth does a story about discovering you aren't wearing clothes fit into a high-tech CPU analogy?
This is a crucial point.
Yeah.
And it's where Ahmed applies a concept he calls semantic displacement.
Semantic displacement.
Yeah. He argues that traditional interpretations were heavily influenced by external older mythologies.
I know.
These mythologies mistakenly translated a crucial Arabic word in this story as private parts.
Which framed the whole simulation as a moral drama about physical nudity.
Right. But when Ahmed audits the root of that word across the entire structural lexicon of the text, it reveals something entirely different.
Which is,
Ahmed states that the word in question doesn't mean private parts at all. It translates to systemic vulnerabilities,
systemic vulnerabilities.
imperfections, fallibilities. The text says the distorter whispered to them in order to make manifest to them their systemic vulnerabilities, which had previously been shielded from their awareness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So the distorter's goal wasn't to strip them of their clothes, it was an exploit.
exactly. It was a targeted attack on the prototype node's operating system.
The goal was to make them self-conscious of their own limitations, their finite nature, their mortality.
By making the node hyper-aware of its vulnerability, it triggered a baseline survival drive.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So the prototype node realized its battery was finite, it was going to die.
Yes.
And in a panic, what does a system do when it thinks it's going to fail? It tries to back itself up. It tries to persist.
Exactly. The narrative states that the distorter convinced them they were restricted from something called the shajara.
Which is traditionally translated as the tree, right?
Right. But Ahmed translates this systemically as the branching system of lineage, power, and legacy.
Oh, wow.
The distorter claimed that accessing this branching system was the only way to achieve persistence and become autonomous, immortal power nodes.
So instead of staying plugged into the main power source, like remaining in collective equilibrium with the primary source,
Yeah.
they tried to build their own infinite battery pack.
That's a great analogy.
They reached for artificial persistence through power and legacy. And that unauthorized background process is what crashed the system.
It's a brilliant reframing, isn't it? It shifts the story from a fable about modesty into a deep psychological blueprint.
It really does.
It explains exactly how human beings react when they are overwhelmed by the noise of their own mortality. They lose their equilibrium, their chests constrict, and they frantically try to build legacy and power to save themselves.
That is fascinating. So if the prototype node failed by succumbing to that noise injection, how do we successfully run the code today?
Right. How do we avoid crashing our own systems if our baseline is vulnerability?
Exactly.
We have to elevate above the atmospheric distortion. Which brings us to Ahmed's analysis of the very title of the 7th chapter, Al-Araf.
Al-Araf. The heights. The vantage points.
Systemically, Ahmed defines this concept as analytical objectivity.
Okay.
The text describes a partition, an elevated vantage point.
Okay.
And on these elevations are entities who recognize everyone by their objective marks, their inherent data signatures.
I pictured this like a stock exchange.
Oh, okay, how so?
Well, down on the trading floor, it is absolute chaos, right?
Yeah.
It's loud, people are panicking, making split-second decisions based on fear, rumors, and noise. That is the human condition under Haraj.
That's a great visual.
But Al-Araf is like taking an elevator up to the soundproof, glass-walled manager's office hovering directly above the floor.
Yes.
Up there, the screaming fades away. You aren't reacting to the panic. You are just reading the overarching data set with absolute clarity.
That is exactly the state of Al-Araf. These are the advanced observers.
Because they have perfectly processed the ALMS signal.
Exactly. Their processors, their chests, are not constricted by cultural bias, fear, or the systemic noise of the trading floor.
They possess the insight to look down and recognize the objective marks of systemic success and failure in the human nodes operating below them.
Yes, they can look at the historical data set of humanity and see clearly, like, that society experienced cognitive constriction, their systems collapsed. This other society maintained structural integrity.
But practically speaking, how do you actually get an elevator pass to that glass office?
Well, the manual provides the instruction explicitly. It commands the observation of the source data, that LAM, the peer transmission we discussed earlier.
Right, the data link.
The text says, follow what has been revealed to you from your Lord, and do not follow other than him any allies.
And Ahmed argues this is the ultimate rejection of blind following.
Yes, this is the checksum, the validation protocol in action. If you want to avoid the constriction, you cannot just blindly download inherited mythology, cultural biases, or external unverified traditions.
Because doing so introduces corrupt legacy code into your processor.
Exactly, which destroys your structural integrity. You must audit your intake and follow only the pure transmitted data.
It's incredible because it completely removes the emotion from belief and replaces it with an almost scientific rigor.
It really does.
You aren't just feeling your way through reality, you are rigorously auditing your own cognitive intake to ensure the code is clean.
And that leads us to the functional purpose of this entire architectural module, which Ahmed synthesizes at the end of his analysis.
The end game of the system.
Exactly. It all culminates in the law of weight and measure. Or wazn.
Right, because truth in this framework isn't just an abstract, floating idea. It's not a weightless concept.
No, truth has mass. Real, measurable, objective mass.
Interesting.
The chapter concludes its opening argument by confirming that the final result of the human system is based entirely on this weight.
The scale.
Yes. The text states that the weighing on the final day is the truth itself. Those whose scales are heavy will be the successful ones.
And those whose scales are light.
They are the ones who will lose themselves.
So what does a heavy scale actually mean in the context of an operating system?
A heavy scale means a human node that has successfully integrated the ALMS signal into its structural core.
It has processed reality without crashing.
Yes, and in doing so, it has generated objective moral mass. The weight is the manifest structural result of applying the SAD, the validation.
Which means a light scale isn't necessarily about being evil or malicious, it's about lacking density.
Precisely. It means the node lost itself to the noise of the trading floor.
It didn't validate the signal, its chest constricted under the pressure, and it failed to accumulate any structural reality.
Exactly. It lived an entirely hollow existence.
Wow.
It's the ultimate cosmic architecture. The ALMS header, in Ahmed's view, proves that the only way to avoid historical and psychological collapse is to maintain an expansive, calibrated processor that can actually bear the tangible weight of reality.
Ahmed's architecture here is incredibly intricate. I mean, we started this deep dive by asking if your chest could be a CPU cooling system.
We did.
And through this lens, we see it operating as exactly that. This isn't just about passively believing the right thing.
No, not at all.
It's about having the structural resilience to carry the immense literal weight of reality without your chest collapsing into that agonizing friction of cognitive dissonance.
It empowers a person to rise above the noise and reach the heights of analytical clarity. It fundamentally changes the goal of human cognition.
The goal is no longer just survival.
Right. The goal is building a system capable of sustaining the truth.
And that leaves us with a final, lingering question for you to ponder today.
What's that?
If truth is a tangible weight, and your chest is a processor designed to carry it, what unverified noise, what corrupt legacy code or inherited mythology are you currently allowing to take up space on your hard drive?
That's a profound question.
And is that unverified noise the real reason your system feels like it's constantly crashing?